Hey, so I wanted to try something a little bit different today. And just, I know a lot of you are using Google Classroom on your phone. And I know I've posted things in like a YouTube video and then Classwork and then the PDF of Between the World and Me, all in three different places. It must be hard for you to toggle between your different tabs. So I created a Google form that has your classwork and the text all in one place. So I guess let me know if that works any better for you, or if there are problems that you're still running into. Okay? Keep me in the loop. All right, so this is your classwork for May 13th, Wednesday. And so here we go. This has to do with Between the World and Me. It's pages 63 through 71. So for today, our focus question is that we're trying to see what this passage adds to Coates's argument about the ways that Black bodies are particularly vulnerable, okay? And whether this passage contributes to his argument, if it strengthens his argument, or whether it, in some sense, weakens his argument as well, okay? So here we go. We're going to read, and there's going to be questions as you go to kind of guide you in your understanding of what's going on. All right, so we're at the bottom of page 61, where we left off. And let's begin. And I could no longer predict where I would find my heroes. Sometimes I would walk with friends down to U Street. Again, he's in Washington, D.C. You'll remember he was at Howard University last time we left off. Okay, so he'd walk with his friends down to U Street and hang out at the local clubs. This was the era of Bad Boy and Biggie, One More Chance, and Hypnotize. I almost never danced as much as I wanted to. I was crippled by some childhood fear of my own body. But I would watch how Black people moved, how in these clubs they danced as though their bodies could do anything. And their bodies seemed as free as Malcolm X, voice. On the outside, Black people controlled nothing, least of all the fate of their bodies, which could be commandeered by the police, which could be erased by the guns, which were so profligate. Profligate is really common all over the place. Hard to predict, okay? Which could be raped, beaten, jailed. But in the clubs, under the influence of 2-for-1 rum and cokes, under the spell of low lights, in thrall of hip-hop music, I felt them to be in total control of every step, every nod, every pivot. All right. So how does this, the way that Black people behave, appear, the impression that they give in these clubs, how does that compare to what Coates has said before, specifically maybe about the dress and the style of boys on the streets, and boys and girls both on the streets? All right, of Baltimore. All right, so your text dependent questions here are, why does Coates say he would rarely dance in these moments, though he may have wanted to? What does this have to do with his childhood fear of his own body? What do you think he is afraid of? All right. How does that connect with his previous argument that Black bodies are vulnerable? All right. What is he so afraid of in his body? Think about the ways that if he did not have very careful control of his body and carefully conform to the rules of school, of the streets, of his parents, the ways that he was, that there was the threat of violence, of being beaten or being put out of school and onto the streets where he would surely encounter violence. Okay? You can go ahead and give your answer for those. All right, next passage. All I then wanted was to write as those Black people danced, with control, power, joy, warmth. I was in and out of classes at Howard. I felt that it was the time to go. It was time to go, to declare myself a graduate of the Mecca, if not the university. I was publishing music reviews, articles, and essays in the local alternative newspaper, and this meant contact with more human beings. I had editors, more teachers, and those were the first white people I'd ever really known on any personal level. They defied my presumptions. Right, so that means that they defied his presumptions, his assumptions before he really got to know them. Okay. They were afraid neither for me nor of me. Instead, they saw in my unruly curiosity and softness something that was to be treasured and harnessed. And they gave me the art of journalism, a powerful technology for seekers. I reported on local DC, and I found that people would tell me things, that the same softness that once made me a target now compelled people to trust me with their stories. This was incredible. I was barely out of the fog of childhood, where questions simply died in my head. Now I could call and ask people why a popular store closed, why a show had been canceled, why there were so many churches and so few supermarkets. Journalism gave me another tool of exploration, another way of unveiling the laws that bound my body. It was beginning to come together, even if I could not yet see what the it was. In Moreland, I could explore the histories, and Moreland is a library on the Howard campus. Okay, I believe that that's where his dad actually worked. His dad worked in the library at Howard. In Moreland, I could explore the histories and traditions. Out on the yard, I could see these traditions in effect. And with journalism, I could directly ask people about the two, or anything else I might wonder. So much of my life was defined by not knowing. Why did I live in a world where teenage boys stood in the parking lot of the 7-Eleven pulling out their guns, right? Why was it normal for my father, like all the parents I knew, to reach for his bow? And why was life so different out there, in that other world past the asteroids? What did the people whose images were once beamed into my living room have that I did not? He's talking about the kids and the stories of people on TV, okay, that he had previously addressed. Okay, so my question for you is, what drew Coase to pursue journalism after Howard University? Well, how does that connect to the series of questions he asks at the end of the passage right there? Okay, what is it that he is getting out of journalism? All right, this is at the bottom of page 64. I fell in love at the Mecca one last time. This is at Howard still, right? Lost my balance in all my boyhood confusion, under the spell of a girl from Chicago. This was your mother. I see us standing there with a group of friends in the living room of her home. I stood with a blunt in one hand and a beer in another. I inhaled, passed it off to the Chicago girl, and when I brushed her long, elegant fingers, I shuddered a bit from the blast. Remember, he is in college, so he is 18, more than 18. I assume probably more than 21 because he is drinking and choosing to smoke marijuana. Okay? Keep that in mind. All right. I inhaled, passed it off to the Chicago girl, and when I brushed her long, elegant fingers, I shuddered a bit from the blast. So you have to ask yourself, is he literally talking about a blast, or is he figuratively talking about a blast? Why does he compare brushing along this girl's fingers to a blast, like an explosion? Okay. She brought the blunt to her plum-painted lips, pulled, exhaled, and then pulled the smoke back in. A week earlier, I had kissed her. And now, watching this display of smoke and flame, and already feeling the effects, I was lost and running, and wondering what it must be to embrace her, to be exhaled by her, to return to her and leave her high. She had never known her father, which put her in the company of the greater number of everyone I'd known. I felt then that these men, these fathers, were the greatest of cowards. What is he talking about here? He says he never knew her father. And then that includes everybody that he's ever known. All right. Why does he call them cowards? But I also felt that the galaxy was playing with loaded dice, which ensured an excess of cowards in our ranks. Why does he say that? That there is an excess of cowards, like too many cowards in their rank or in our ranks. Who is he talking about? All right. Given that the galaxy, as he says, was playing with loaded dice. Loaded dice, probably most of us know, in case you don't, is when your dice, how do I put it? When your dice are not quite real, they're fake in some way, and they lead you to winning more often than you lose, or to losing more often than you win. Okay. Why does he say that the galaxy is playing with loaded dice, and that ensures an excess of these cowards among our ranks, young black men. The girl from Chicago understood this too, and she understood something more, that all are not equally robbed of their bodies, that the bodies of women are set out for pillage in ways I could never truly know. And she was the kind of black girl who'd been told as a child that she had better be smart because her looks wouldn't save her. And then told as a young woman that she was really pretty for a dark-skinned girl. And so there was, all about her, a knowledge of cosmic injustices. The same knowledge I'd glimpsed all those years ago watching my father reach for his belt, watching the suburban dispatches in my living room, watching the golden hair boys with their toy trucks and football cards, and dimly perceiving the great barrier between the world and me. All right. My questions for you. Why does Coates write that all are not equally robbed of their bodies, that the bodies of women are set out for pillage, which means stealing? Pillage is when something is stolen, all right? Usually on a mass scale, on a very large scale, in ways I could never truly know. What is he saying here about black women in particular? About the ways that they are especially vulnerable, even more maybe so than himself. All right. So what does this add to his previous argument about vulnerability? And do you agree with what Coates is arguing here? Does your own experience, my students, reinforce, does it strengthen or challenge, weaken what he is saying, his argument? All right. Let's keep going. You can pause here if you want to stop and answer your questions. Nothing between us was ever planned, not even you. We were both 24 years old when you were born, the normal age for most Americans, but among the class, we soon found ourselves, we ranked as teenage parents. So it sounds like maybe his class, like his social class, is changing. I assume because he sounds like he's saying that he's a lot younger than other people, and we know that middle and upper class people tend to have kids a lot later than like working class and poor people. All right. With a whiff of fear, we were very often asked if we planned to marry. Marriage was presented to us as a shield against other women, other men, or the corrosive monotony of dirty socks and dishwashing. But your mother and I knew too many people who'd married and abandoned each other for less. The truth of us was always that you were our ring. We'd summoned you out of ourselves, and you were not given a vote. If only for that reason, you deserved all the protection we could muster. Everything else was subordinate to this fact. Subordinate, remember the prefix sub means under, right? So ordinate, like an order, so under the order of other things, okay? If that sounds like a weight, it shouldn't. The truth is that I owe you everything I have. Before you, I had my questions, but nothing beyond my own skin in the game. And that was really nothing at all, because I was a young man and not yet clear of my own human vulnerabilities. But I was grounded and domesticated by the plain fact that should I now go down, I would not go down alone. This is what I told myself, at least. It was comforting to believe that the fate of my own body, and the bodies of my family were under my powers. You will have to man up, we tell our sons. Anyone can make a baby, but it takes a man to be a father. This is what they had told me all my life. It was the language of survival, a myth that helped us cope with the human sacrifice that finds us no matter our manhood. As though our hands were ever our own. As though plunder of dark energy was not at the heart of our galaxy, and the plunder was there, if I wished to see it. Okay? So why is he saying here, as though our hands were ever our own, right? This idea that our that your ability to be a good father, your manhood is in your own hands to control. But then he says, as though our hands were ever our own. So therefore, who is he implying has control over his hands? Does he? Is he saying that something else or someone else does? If so, what is that in fact controls his hands, controls his fate, right? My question for you here is, what does Coates mean when he reflects that before you, I had my questions, but nothing beyond my own skin in the game? And that was really nothing at all. How did having his son change that reality for him? All right. Here we go, getting towards the end here. One summer, I traveled out to Chicago to see your mother. I rode down the Dan Ryan with friends and beheld, for the first time, the State Street corridor, a 4-mile stretch of dilapidated public housing. There were projects all over Baltimore, but nothing so expansive as this. The housing occurred to me as a moral disaster, not just for the people living there, but for the entire region, the metropolis of commuters who drove by each day and with their quiet acquiescence tolerated such a thing. But there was so much more in those projects than I was, even in all my curiosity, prepared to see. Your maternal grandmother once visited us during the pregnancy. She must have been horrified. We were living in Delaware. We had almost no furniture. I had left Howard without a degree and was living on the impoverished wages of a freelance writer. On the last day of her visit, I drove your grandmother to the airport. Your mother was her only child, as you are my only child. And having watched you grow, I know that nothing could possibly be more precious to her. She said to me, "You take care of my daughter." When she got out of the car, my world had shifted. I felt that I had crossed some thresholds, out of the foyer of my life and into the living room. Everything that was the past seemed to be another life. There was before you, and then there was after. And in this after, you were the God I'd never had. I submitted before your needs, and I knew then that I must survive for something more than survival's sake. I must survive for you. You were born that August. I thought of the great spectrum of the Mecca. Black people from Belize, Black people with Jewish mothers, Black people with fathers from Bangalore, Black people from Toronto and Kingston. Toronto's in Canada, Kingston's in Jamaica. Black people who spoke Russian, who spoke Spanish, who played Mongo Santa Maria, who understood mathematics and sat up in bone labs, unearthing the mysteries of the enslaved. There was more out there than I had ever hoped for, and I wanted you to have it. I wanted you to know that the world in its entirety could never be found in the schools alone, nor on the streets alone, nor in the trophy case. I wanted you to claim the whole world as it is. I wanted Tolstoy is the Tolstoy of the Zulus to immediately be obvious to you. And yet, even in this cosmopolitan wish, I felt the old power of ancestry, because I had come to knowledge at the Mecca that my ancestors made, and I was compelled toward the Mecca by the struggle that my ancestors made. The struggle is in your name, Somori. You were named for Samori Touré, who struggled against French colonizers for the right to his own black body. He died in captivity, but the profits of that struggle and others like it are ours, even when the object of our struggle, as is so often true, escapes our grasp. I learned this living among a people whom I would never have chosen, because the privileges of being black are not always self-evident. We are, as Derek Bell once wrote, the faces at the bottom of the well. But there really is wisdom down here. And that wisdom accounts for much of the good in my life. And my life down here accounts for you. Okay. Why do you think Coates gave his son, the name that he did? What was he trying to communicate to him or give to him? Okay. And here's our last chunk. Looks like, yep, and your exit ticket. All right. There was also wisdom in those streets. excuse me, I think now of the old rule that held that should a boy be set upon in someone else's chancy hood, his friends must stand with him, and they must all take their beating together. And I now know that within this edict lay the key to all living. None of us were promised to end the fight on our feet, fists raised to the sky. We could not control our enemy's number, strength, nor weaponry. Sometimes you just caught a bad one. But whether you fought or ran, you did it together, because that is the part that was in our control. What we must never do is willingly hand over our own bodies or the bodies of our friends. That was the wisdom. We knew we did not lay down the direction of the street, but despite that, we could and must fashion the way of our walk. And that was the deeper meaning of your name, that the struggle in and of itself has meaning. The wisdom was not unique to our people, but I think it has special meaning to those of us born out of mass rape, whose ancestors were carried off and divided up into policies and stocks. I have raised you to respect every human being as singular. You must extend that same respect to the past. Slavery is not an indefinable mass of flesh. It is a particular, specific enslaved woman whose mind is as active as your own, whose range of feeling is as vast as your own, who prefers the way the light falls in one particular spot in the woods, who enjoys fishing where the water eddies in a nearby stream, who loves her mother in her own complicated way, thinks her sister talks too loud, has a favorite cousin, a favorite season, who excels at dressmaking and knows inside herself that she is as intelligent and capable as anyone. Slavery is this same woman born in a world that loudly proclaims its love of freedom and inscribes this love in its essential texts. A world in which these same professors hold this woman a slave, hold her mother a slave, her father a slave, her daughter a slave. And when this woman peers back into the generations, all she sees is the enslaved. What is he saying here about this world that loudly proclaims its love of freedom while keeping all of these individuals and all their particularities enslaved? What is he saying about our world and about the hypocrisy of our world? All right. She can hope for more. She can imagine some future for her grandchildren. But when she dies, the world, which is really the only world she can ever know, ends. For this woman, enslavement is not a parable. It is damnation. It is the never-ending night. And the length of that night is most of our history. Never forget that we were enslaved in this country longer than we have been free. Never forget that for 250 years, Black people were born into chains. Whole generations followed by more generations who knew nothing but chains. All right, so that's the end of our reading for today. You have 3 more text-dependent questions real quick here, and then an exit ticket. All right, what point is Coate trying to make when he says, what we must never do is willingly hand over our own bodies or those of our friends? Why does he make this point so explicit, so clear and obvious to his son? All right, what is he trying to show him? Do you agree with what Coates is arguing here? Why? Why not? Are they exceptions to this rule? And that last question. When are those exceptions? All right. Why does he follow this up with the idea that this wisdom is not unique to our people, but it has special meaning to those of us born out of mass rape, whose ancestors were divided up into policies and stocks, right? Whose ancestors were owned essentially and traded like a cow might be. All right. Why does all this mean something different for Coates and other Black Americans? All right. And then your exit ticket. Overall, has Coates' argument about the vulnerability of Black bodies remained consistent, remained the same, or has it shifted? Has it changed over time? Does that make his argument overall stronger or weaker? All right. You can, well, we're at the end of our video here, but go ahead and make sure that you're answering all those TDQs and that you're doing your Instagram discussion posts as well. All right. Good luck to you. And don't forget to tell me what your project idea is for formative task 2, okay? There's a Google form about that posted in the Google Classroom stream. All right, ask me if you have any questions. You should have my Instagram at this point, and if not, you can text me. All right, bye.